Hey, my name is Benj Miller. I'm the CEO of System and Soul. I reign from Atlanta, Georgia, and am honored to be here today.
Benj, it's fantastic to have you here. I used to have a team in Atlanta, so I'd fly into Atlanta, and then I think last year I was at a conference and I stayed downtown and I ran around downtown. It's fab. I mean, I'd spent 5 years in and out of Atlanta, never seen downtown, didn't know the area, just in a hotel next to the office. Lovely place.
Yeah, my wife and I have been here for almost 20 years and have no intentions of leaving until our kids are grown, and then we'll find a place by the water somewhere.
Yeah. And how close to the city are you? Are you in the city?
Okay, so in Atlanta, we have a beltway. And so you're either ITP inside the perimeter or
Okay.
outside the perimeter.
Right.
And there's some ego involved there for different people, but we are just outside the perimeter on the north side.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Right. And what do you do?
What do I do? I work with senior leadership teams of stage two companies. They've already kind of figured out their product market fit. They've gotten some growth, and usually what's happening is that the old adage of what got you here isn't going to get you there. And they're not sure what those things are. And so much of it has to do with transitioning from being a founder led organization to a team that's led by a team of senior leaders that are aligned, healthy, and effective. I help them make that transition.
That's fab. I was just talking to a colleague because I'm off to do some work in the States in a couple of weeks. Much, much bigger organization. But that whole aligned, solid, that never goes away. That
No,
working
it
on the team
doesn't.
never goes away.
It doesn't. We talk about stage two companies and generally can kind of quantify that 25 to 75 employees. But the dirty little secret is like my last three clients are 200 employees, 250, 1300. It's all the same principles, blocking and tackling, team health, all of that it comes down to the core fundamental same things over and over and over at whatever scale you're at.
But that scale, I suppose you did 25. You said you defined it as 25, 75. I think about as threes and tens, like 30 and 100. And at 30, you've definitely got a founder. And
Yes.
there might even be trying to manage all those 30 people or 25 people on
Yes.
their own. Certainly, if
Yep.
there's two or three founders that can probably make that work. But at 100, they need a leadership team. And at
Absolutely.
300, they need a leadership team and a management team.
Yes.
And so what gets in the way? I know you working with are you working primarily with a founder that somehow is getting stuck at creating that team?
Yeah, usually they have a team, but what's happened is that they've elevated their best technicians in all the core functions of their business. And so they have a team, but they're not leaders, they're not managers. They've never been taught how to lead or manage. They don't maybe even want to be doing that. They're just the tallest midget in the circus.
I was going to be polite. I was going to say they're the sort of contributors, sole contributors,
Yes. Yeah.
or ICs as one of our clients calls them, and they
Yep.
just that somebody was looking, and they're the least worst candidate. But you're right, they're the tallest midget in the circus. I like that.
Yeah. What happened as a result of that, that leader can't actually trust that person to, they've probably grown up through the organization, been there for a few years, and been there at a time when the founder could be more instructive to them. Founders know every aspect of their business. So they can tell the sales guy, here's what you need to go, and ops guy, here's what you need to go do, until it hits a certain scale. Then you've got this person in there that you've been telling what to do, but you really need somebody in sales that's telling the organization what to do, right? That's what the leadership looks like, is they're owning that function of the business, and the trust between that founder and that leader of that function has to be super high. And a lot of that is competence, a lot of it's leadership, a lot of it's character.
And you're right. Lots of those people didn't join the organization to be managers, and they don't want to be managers. So, so what do you do? Do you strip it all out and start again?
Well,
Start hiring from outside, or
yeah, I think you've got lots of options, but all of them start with having very clear, candid conversations. What do
Okay.
we need for the next season of this business? And then does that fit you? Does that suit you? Are you there? Do you want to grow into that? Because maybe they're only, one or two steps away from being the leader that you need, and you can invest in them to get there. I learned this lesson the hard way. My brothers worked for me in one of my businesses for 17 years, which is a miracle by its own sake. But at one point, he was managing a function of the business, and he was at it for less than a year, and he was ready to quit. He was absolutely burned out, hated the business, hated everything. We sat down, started having some really, really clear conversations. Well, he was the absolute highest value individual contributor in the organization. And he hated leading a team of people. He just wanted to do his craft. He was a craftsman. And so when I gave him the freedom of, well, you don't have to, you can go back and you don't have to lead anybody. And he's like, oh, I thought I did to grow with the company and all that. I'm like, no, absolutely not. So it was just this very clear conversation. How can we get aligned on where you're at and what you want and where the company's at and what we need?
So often that whole grow with the company thing, so often people go, oh, well, the individual contributors get paid X. If you want to be paid more, the managers are being paid more. And early on, there's no concept of paying an individual contributor more than a manager. You realize that that's the thing later once you've stumbled.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that takes us into a whole nother thing where we're learning, and we have this new tool at System and Soul called 6 Dimensions of Compensation. Because what happens so many times is people get stuck in a compensation conversation. It goes straight to salary and benefits, right? And so the only way to be promoted and grow as a person is to take that promotion, which means more money. But the reality is there's 5 other dimensions. Our social dimension, our spiritual dimension, our physical dimension, our mental, and our physiological. So how are the ways that you want to be compensated, which is very correlated to stage of life? How I wanted compensated as a single, 20 something versus how I want compensated as a, mid 40s, married with 4 kids, that are thinking about college, very different. Like I want to be able to go to sports games. So the physical compensation of the flexibility of my calendar means more to me than another, 10% bump in salary. So you have to, again, this goes back to having actual conversations with the people that we work with. If I can understand how you're motivated and how you want to be compensated in this stage of life, we might be giving money away that's not really solving a problem that much simpler things could solve. Something as simple as social. Do you enjoy the team that you're working with? Something spiritual. Does your work have purpose? Like, how can we give people more of what matters to them and compensate them? They're gonna feel more rewarded, more bought in, stay longer. We all know the retention problem that everybody has right now. And so this is, again, we're going back to business is human. Relationships are human. We've got to have human conversations. And I think we've tried to operationalize everything out of having just good human conversations.
I'm going to come back and ask you that about conversations in a moment. But you said earlier, you talked about the season of the business. So I guess there's something deeper there that has that phrase or that word has some meaning in your framework.
Well, I'm just referring to, in stage 1, I call that the barbarian phase. We don't, we're super reactive. We take every opportunity. We're trying to figure out where we fit in this world. We're just muscling our way through stage 1. Stage 2.
In my mind, I've just got Vikings. I just have rape and pillage. Rape and pillage. Well, we're not planting crops. We're just stealing it from everybody we can.
Well, part of that's true because you're trying to figure out where you do want to settle, right? Mm-hmm. And so in stage 2, you start to settle. And so the activities that we did in a barbarian phase don't work in a stage 2, and they're definitely not going to get us to a stage 3. So when I talk about season of the business, it's just like, where are we at with what we need for the next season?
Okay. Which is the next stage? Are they synonymous?
Yeah. One of the exercises that I take companies through is saying, all right, this podcast, Dom, like what version of this podcast are you on? And you're like, well, I'm on version 3 because I started with this format and then I changed it to this. I'm on version 3. I'm like, so what does version 4 look like? And you start to paint a picture of that preferred vision, future, where you're going. And they're like, all right, well, let's back that up. How do we get to 3.1? What's the first step, right? So sometimes there's the macro stage of the business, but the seasons can be much smaller, and the seasons might be, I love working on a 90-day cadence. What are our quarterly objectives, our OKRs, but what are the big things that we're working on right now? And we're going to live in this season. I love to put a theme on the year, right? So our theme for next year is 10X. Very much out of an inspiration from Dr. Benjamin Hardy's book, 10X is easier than 2X.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan.
Yeah, really, really challenged my thinking. Actually, I'll admit, I was stubborn the first time I read it and kind of nodded my head. The second time I read it, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of keys to unlock a lot of doors in here. So we are sitting with our team in this, like, what are the activities that we have to do and not do? A lot of it's about what do we stop doing in order to 10X. And that's a season of the business.
It's interesting because I think about when I'm listening to that 10X 10X is easier than 2X. I was struck by one of the things is which other people, if you surround yourself by people who are 2X thinkers, then you'll never 10X the business. And I was thinking, that is often one of the challenges that certainly scale-ups that I'm working with have. Back to the conversation we were having earlier about leadership teams.
Exactly.
And I was talking to somebody today, and I said, I said to people, if you're a football team, if you're a soccer team in the UK, what league are you in? And what is your aspiration? Where do you think you might be? And how likely is it that all of the players on the field today will be on the field when we've been promoted a few times?
Yeah.
Because if they're not prepared to swap any players out, then they're probably not going to get promoted, even if that's their aspiration. And so, that gets into, some of these difficult conversations about, is the team good enough? Can the team actually 10X the business?
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. I was, this is one of my proudest moments as a coach, just because I was giggling on the inside and holding stoic on the outside. But we were having an org chart conversation, and I'd been with this company for about 18 months, and they'd made some drastic changes. But there was one guy not in the room because he's not on the leadership team, but he still reports to the CEO. And we get done with this big conversation. I'm like, so we'll call him Sam to protect his identity. What are we doing with Sam over here? Why is he still up here? And the CEO talks, well, he's, I hired him. He works straight for me. And I think, he really, that's important to him and blah, blah, blah. He just talks for a while. And I just looked at him and I said, so Sam's emotions are running this company? And he goes, shit, Benj. And actually, this was really wise on their part. The CTO, who, technology guy, you're a technology guy, you'll get this. In technology, you've got technical debt, right?
Yeah.
So they came to the conclusion that they had structural debt in their organization with this SAM position. But what was really, really, I thought was insightful, where I'm like pushing them, like rip the Band-Aid off. In the moment, they're like, hey, we've got, in this season, back to the season, we've got bigger things to tackle than Sam.
Right.
So they just put that on the backlog and called it structural debt. And I kind of loved that analogy. They knew it was there. They knew they had to deal with it, and this wasn't the time.
Yeah, one of the things I come across issues like this all the time with, team size, leadership team of 12.
Oh, right? Painful.
Because they made all those individual contributors, all those ICs became heads of. Yep. They've got 12 heads of. And so they've now got this mix of actual leaders and other people, and they don't want to upset anybody. So I often just say, okay, 5 years from now, like, how big are we? How many employees have we got? What's our turnover? How big's the leadership team? What are the job titles of the people who might be in that leadership team, if this is how many of them there are? And then, because you do it so far away, it doesn't feel difficult to discuss for anybody in the room.
Right.
And because it's so far away. But then once you've made the decision, bang, then we're now working towards that.
Yeah.
And it happens, in my experience, it happens really, really quickly once
Yeah.
people have got clarity on what that future vision is.
Yeah. I don't know if it's still true, but the CEO of Ford, do you know how many direct reports he had or how many senior leaders he had?
No,
4.
good. That's a good number.
I love it. But to your point, you get a company with 100 employees and there's 12 people in the leadership team. You're kind of like, this isn't right.
They've got some structural debt.
Yes.
So look, you've written a new book, just published a new book.
Yes. Yes. Labor of Love.
What's it called?
It's called Renegades. It's Break Rules, Find Freedom, a book for founders. So it's a lot of what we're talking about here, but what we find is that the renegade founder, as we call them, everything works until it doesn't. And the reason they're a renegade, the reason their company exists is because they chose to break some of the social norms that are out there. Like you've got to go against some flow in order to start something of value and purpose. And so you've gotten to that point, and what they run into is exactly what we were talking. We call it the founder gap, where I can no longer touch everything in the business myself. It's not working. We wanted to create freedom for ourselves. Now we've created a prison, and I've got to pick up the phone whenever it rings, and it's always problems and fires, and I haven't taken a real vacation. And the way out of that, the world, probably half the books sitting behind you are some sort of version of how we have to grow up and mature as a leader and become something that we're not. We're renegade. And they want to strip the renegade out of us. And so I'm like, well, the premise of the book is I'm imploring these founders, don't lose your renegade. The world needs your renegade energy. And the shift is to go from a renegade founder to a renegade leader. So what does a renegade leader look like in the organization? I do not want you to grow up and, go from your startup Silicon Valley hoodie to having to wear a suit. And, that's just not what it's about. We need that renegade energy. And so we talk about 6 shifts. And one of the most freeing things is that the founder has to, the renegade leader has to champion these shifts in the organization, but they're probably not the one to lead the charge. And so if we can understand what they are and maybe find the right people in the organization, then it starts to develop that leadership team that's now owning the cadence of the organization, the measurement of are we winning or not? How do we know?
I love this because I have calls from founders regularly where they ring me up and I say, what's the problem? And they just say, I fucking hate my job.
Yeah.
Right. I've had people in tears and they feel as though they have to become this person that they're not to succeed, or they've already gone down the track of becoming the person that and you know what, they're not very good at it. And it's just draining and debilitating.
Yes. 100%.
And they no longer get any joy from this thing they created at all.
Yes.
And as you say, they created this prison. So what are these 6 things that they need to focus on that to get somebody else to do that lets them do the thing that they're great at?
Well, yeah, and they play a role in it. They just don't have to lead the charge with all of them.
Yeah.
So the first shift, we go from the world says, Dom, play the hand you're dealt. You're dealt a hand, play it. The renegade founder says, I'll bet on myself.
Yeah.
Forget about the hand that I'm dealt. I'm gonna bet on myself. And the shift is that we have to bet with intention. So when you start an organization, you are really making a big bet on yourself. When the organization grows, you need to pull some other people into the bets that you're making and enable other people to make specific bets. So when you think about you're at a roulette table, you've got a finite set of chips. You're going to put them on 36 red. I don't even know if 36 is red, but let's pretend. There's an opportunity cost for that, right? Because I could put it on other places.
Yeah.
And the reward better be worth the risk, right? founders naturally think like that. But if we're elevating some of these individual contributors, managers, their status quo, their safety and comfort driven, they're not necessarily naturally going to bet with intention. So the shift is to teach the organization how to bet with intention. We do that in a couple ways. The second one, the world says, don't quit your day job. And the Renegade founder says, I'm going to dance to the beat of my own drum. I don't care what music you're playing. I'm going to go and dance to the beat of my own drum. And the shift that we talk about here is what we call the cadence shift. And it's to set the baseline. So if you're familiar with jazz, all improv, you can have the same 4 people up there every night and it can sound totally different. But what is consistent is that the bassist is laying down the bass line and everything's being improvised off that. Well, the bass line, because there's a bass line, gives everybody, even the listener in the room, a sense that they know what's coming or what should come. There's a cadence to it that can be expected. Most Renegade founders don't really care about a cadence. They love the improvisation part of it, but they don't care about the cadence. But the people that we need to hire, one of the most dignifying things that we can do for them is to give them a cadence so they have some consistency. They know, they know when their weekly team meeting is. They know what their big objectives are. They know when they're going to get a coaching conversation and what that's going to go like the rhythms of the business. And again, founder, probably not the one to lead that charge, but they've got to buy in and empower somebody to do it.
And they've got to they've got to make sure that they don't undermine that person.
Absolutely. There's a surrender that has to happen to let other people take over for the sake of the organization. Yeah.
What's next? I love this.
All right.
I'm loving them so far. These are absolutely fit with my own experience. So
yeah. Rule number 3, the world says, know what you're getting yourself into. Like, count the cost before you do it. Renegade founder says, I'm going to go with my gut. They've got an intuition driven by a purpose that will outweigh any data that sits in front of them. And that's great. We're back to our analogy, when we've got 20 people in the organization and I can interact with all of them, then my gut's really strong. But when we start to get levels of abstraction away from that, my gut can no longer do it because my gut's no longer experiencing all these different things in the business. So the shift is to know when we're winning. And I love the analogy of a scoreboard for this. Some people talk about a scorecard or, your KPIs, whatever. I just love the analogy of a scoreboard because a scoreboard lets you know, not after the game, but in the game, if we're winning or not. Yeah. So at the individual level, the team level, at the company level, if we know the data, if we know the metrics that will point to a win for the game that we're playing, then everybody's aligned. There's so much alignment. And I fought this as an entrepreneur for the first 10, maybe 15 years of my career. I didn't want to impose a number on anyone. That would be so constricting and evil of me. And just like the cadence, just like the baseline idea, I've learned that some people just want to know if they're winning. They just want the clarity. And to give them that expectation of hey, my buddy Jonathan Reynolds has, 300 plus employees. And he talks about this so well. He's like, everybody always expects 100% of their paycheck. Every 2 weeks, they have this expectation that I pay them their paycheck. So why can't I have an expectation that I get 100% of what I'm paying for? And so I'm going to measure that and I'm going to give them that clarity. And that's super inspiring to me.
I had a chat on the podcast with Jim Harter, who's the chief scientist at Gallup. And Gallup reckon 85% of employee engagement and productivity comes as a result of their interactions with their team leader or manager. And Jim said the 80-20 rule applies. He said, so if managers just do one thing, they get most of the upside. That one thing is a weekly one-to-one a weekly check-in with them, with their employee. 10 to 15 minutes is all it needs to be. And if they only do one thing in that meeting, they get most of the reward for doing the thing. And he said that's to praise them for a job well done. But he said, you have to know what the job expectations are. And you have to know that they've done it. So you have to have the scoreboard. And without the scoreboard, you get to 5 o'clock on a Friday. You need to know when you go home, did I win?
Yeah.
Like, did I do what I was supposed to do? Was today a good day?
Exactly. You know? How do I know?
Because otherwise you have a daily huddle and somebody said, where are you stuck? You're going to go, I don't know. Still don't know. Didn't know yesterday. Don't know today. Won't know tomorrow. No idea. I'm just sort of turning up and getting paid every 2 weeks. I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah. But from your experience, what percentage of managers actually do that?
What, have the daily huddle or the weekly check-in?
Yeah, a weekly check-in. And ask that question with that clarity.
So Gallup say about 35% of US organizations that they survey have scorecards in place. That tends to be larger organizations. I think the clients that I work with, most of them put that in place. But I would say I probably work with clients who are in the top 5% and who want to be in the top 1%.
Got it. Yeah.
I think it's nearly 100% for me, but it feels quite rare. And when most companies turn up, they haven't got that in place.
Yeah.
But I think it's just vital. Like, how can you hire somebody if you don't know what your expectations are of them? I mean, how do you sit in an interview and hire somebody if you don't know what you're hiring for?
But we do it all the time.
They're going to be any good at it. I mean, it's amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. It's the blocking and tackling that's so often overlooked. I guess you don't know that. Do you know that expression?
Yeah. I won't ask you about the offside rule, but blocking and tackling.
I can do the offsides rule.
I think it's one of these things which is so counterintuitive to entrepreneurial founders. This is the process piece that is just not going to come intuitively to them. That there's scaling up is the methodology that I would use. Yeah. It's in there.
Sure.
Pick a methodology. It's in your book.
Well, we don't have to go there. We can go on. You ready for the next one?
No. Go on. Wait, what's the next one? I want to go through them all if I can.
All right, we'll hit them all. So the world says, be patient. You might get lucky. And the Renegade founder says, I'm going to make my own luck. I don't have time for that. I'm not going to leave it to chance. I'm going to make my own luck. And when the organization gets to this stage, the shift is what we call the destination shift, which is super simple. It's start with the end in mind. Classic Jim Collins, start with the end in mind. What we challenge them to do is create a destination statement. So where are you going? By when? And so where are we going has to be tangible, because we got, like our last conversation, we got to know when we get there.
Yeah.
When are we going to get there? When is important for setting pace, right? If I say I'm going to be 100 million in 3 years or 100 million in 10 years, well, that's different leadership, different decisions, different capital requirements. Like, it sets pace. And then most importantly of the whole thing, bring in some Simon Sinek action and add a why. So we've got where are we going, when are we getting there, and why does any of it matter? And that why starts to frame the story that other people can see themselves in. They want to play a role in that story. So super simple, but most organizations, especially early on, they jump over some of these pieces, but the clarity that it gives the organization in terms of what they're trying to do and why it matters is vital.
Oh, the sort of, you described it, Jim Collins uses the phrase BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal for
exactly.
Mission. That what are we doing by when, 10 to 25 year vision, 10 to 25 year mission. And he talks about purpose, the why. Simon Sinek talks about that. And lots of companies find that really, really hard.
They do.
And I say, no, why? And they give me another what.
Yeah.
And I go, no, that's what you do. Why do you do it? And they're like, it's just so hard.
Here's the one little trick that I've learned facilitating, 100, 200 of these conversations is it's easier to illuminate what your why is when you get really clear on what drives your who. Like,
Ah,
who do you wake up to make their world better? Is it your customer? Is it your employees? Is it your stakeholders? Like, let's get really honest about who is driving our why.
interestingly, I wrote a blog a while ago, which still gets the most traffic, which is Simon Sinek is fundamentally wrong. Because I'd say exactly that. I say, Apple have got this thing about building amazing products, but unless a small subset,
Yep.
they sell 7% of the world's smartphones and make 70% of the world's profit margin on smartphones. But unless people were prepared to queue around the block in an Apple store, so unless they had a who cared about what they made, what they made would still not have,
Yeah.
I think sometimes I'm prepared to run with it because these things are iterative. And if somebody said, "Look, we're going to create a company which is a great place to work," I live with that because it's better for the employees to work for a company that's a great place to work than not.
Yes.
And at least that means we didn't put profit first. And so there's something tangible that we can use to make strategic decisions with.
Yeah.
And something else will probably become clearer later. A friend of mine, Daniel Priestley, says, "Okay, I want you to pick one of the United Nations goals." The United Nations have 16 goals of sustainability. And he says, "Look, pick one of those. And it's you are in something, and your purpose will be the intersection of the thing you do and one of those." And so that helps people. At least they've only got 16 to pick, so they can go and pick one.
Yeah.
And then it's like, now let's see if that settles for us, and at least that's a shortcut.
Yeah. That's really good. I'm going to go look those up because I don't know what those are. So I'm super curious.
Yeah, so that things about poverty or education, or so you go, oh, we are, we're in the, it's just really helpful. Go and have a look.
Yeah.
I think you find it. I think you find it instructive, and when you're working with a client who's stuck,
Yeah.
it helps them. It helps them get somewhere quickly.
There, I'm not sure I have these 4 right, so forgive me if I'm a little off. I think I got 3 out of 4, but somebody said once that it's helpful if you, as an organization, know how you're wired. And most organizations are wired either to build something, to create something, to serve someone. And I think the last one was like beat somebody, like a competitive spirit, like they were out to beat somebody. I can't remember if those were the exact 4, but that was also helpful in this why conversation.
What was that? Have we got 5 of 6? Is there a 6th?
Well, we only got 4. So 5 is don't make a scene.
Okay.
And the Renegade says, I gotta be me. Now, they don't set out to make a scene, but if who they truly are is at odds with the scene, then who they are is going to win, right? Like I gotta be me. And when we start an organization, that's wonderful. And the organization starts to look and feel a lot like that Renegade Founder. Well, as it grows, we've got to create room for some other people. So we got to do we. That's the ethos choice. And the ethos is about knowing who you are as an organization. And there's 3 critical elements to that. One is your identity. Knowing who you are, we help them frame it in a super simple sentence. The second is values. I'm sure you've had 100 guests come on and talk about values. We don't have to talk about that. And then the third is we're going to call out Jim Collins for like the 4th time. I love his hedgehog concept in Good to Great.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of says, oh yeah, and nods their head. And I'm like, well, what's yours? And they're like, I have no idea. Right. So, so if we can frame those 3 things, identity, values, and your hedgehog, then we can start to look at, first of all, immense amount of focus as an organization, but we know who we are, we know our ethos, we know, and now we can empower our leaders to make decisions that are aligned with who we want to be as we grow our organization. We're not reliant on the founder to make all the conversations because it's about him. It's now about we. So we got to do we is number 5. Number 6 is last, not because it's least, but because it's actually woven through all of the first five. But the world says it really matters who you work for. And so the Renegade Founder says, yeah, great. So I'll work for myself. Right. So they go out and create this thing. They're their own boss. And we've got to get to the people shift. And the people shift says we work together. So it is about the culture that we put people in, which people talk a lot about. And my geeky brain 10 years ago looked at it from an engineering perspective to say, all right, how do we engineer the culture that we want to have? And it was so simple. And so we can break that down. We've got the culture. We need to teach our people to be world-class problem solvers so that founder is no longer the world-class problem solver. It's all of our people. And the last part is the approach to the humanity of the organization. So it's our people development, it's our leader development. And we have a very, we push people in this topic because most people spend a lot of time on the stuff that doesn't actually matter. When we look into what makes an exceptional leader, it comes down to who that person is when they walk in the room, way more than what they do when they walk into the room. And so leadership development is primarily, how do I learn to lead myself better? And then when we can do that, it doesn't turn into how do we lead others better? It turns into how do we help other people lead themselves better? And man, if we can get this, it's an absolute game changer.
It's magic. Let me switch gears slightly as we get towards the end. Benj, what is it you know now you wish you'd known earlier?
Well, you got to buy the book to get all those answers. But the book is super personal to my journey for sure. And it really is, besides those 6 shifts, I go a little deeper into this like personal development, people development. I talk about what building the right team looks like. So there's some tactical things in there. There's a bunch of like exercises at the end of each chapter. You can go and actually do work and put some action to some of the thoughts. I think the biggest thing, let me switch the question just a little bit. I think as leaders, the best leaders I know have created an abstraction between their own identity and their leadership. So if you work for me or I work for you, my identity is not affected by how you feel about me today. So their ability to walk in and weather a storm or have a tough conversation, their ego is almost set to the side. And I think that that's one of the most critical elements of business that nobody talks about.
Okay, that's good. Very good. And what other books should people read other than Renegade?
Yeah. I mean, I love all the classics. I think the ones that we talked about, I keep a stash of because I love passing them out. Leadership and Self-Deception, The Only Leaders Worth Following, and Fecht Perfection. Those are my 3 absolute go-to.
Very good. And what makes you love them? Just to give the listeners a sense of why they should pick them up.
So The Only Leaders Worth Following is written by Tim Spiker. It's very research driven, but they did a lot of research to really articulate and break down the elements of an exceptional leader. And I'll tell you that I won't give you the punchline of that, but I'll tell you that we're all focused on the wrong things. And so that became the foundation for our leadership model within System and Soul, is that book. Leadership and Self-Deception is written as a story by the Arbinger Group. And it does such a great job putting a few metaphors to what we experience with our interactions with people. It applies at home, it applies in our personal life, but very much so in our work life. And it gives teams a little bit of language to articulate what they're experiencing. Another great book in that same regard would be The Empowerment Dynamic or The Power of Ted, which helps people get out of the drama triangle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So similar kind of thinking, different way toward it. And then Fecht Perfection, Victoria just does such an amazing job giving people permission to be who they were created to be. And I have to read that book once a year to get empowered to live, as he would say, let my freak flag fly.
Yeah. Very good. They're fab choices. They're magic. I feel as though I've definitely got two of them. Haven't got the third, so I'll be on Amazon to pick that up. The delight of doing these podcasts. Not only do I get to talk to amazing guests, I get to go and feed my insatiable reading habit.
Yes.
So that's fab. Benj, an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Yes.
Thank you very much
Mutual.
indeed.
Appreciate it.
Speak to you soon.
I'm good friends with Tim Spiker. If you'd ever want to have him on, he's a great.
Oh,